Welcome to the Man of War podcast, and it is an honor to have this man right here, Omar Elattar, in the house. I am excited. Really, man, this is an honor to have you on. I know you were here locally in Miami, so I figured, hey, let's go. For me personally, it's all about conversation. It's all about getting to know you as the person. When I have these types of conversations, I learn so much. I don't know, you have a great podcast,
Thank you.
and I'm sure you probably say the same thing, when you speak to people, it's just like, wow, you're learning. It's just a great environment. I love podcasts. I mean, I listen to so many, and I want to believe that the people that listen to this podcast also get some great takeaways. So
Absolutely.
we're going to start. And I want to know, okay, this is a little bit about your background. So for those people who don't really know who you are, maybe, let's talk about who Omar Elattar was and how you got to where you are, your success today.
Yeah, so it started probably since I was a kid, honestly. I was always a kid who was a dreamer, right? If I played soccer, I wanted to be the best freaking professional soccer player in the world. If I got into skateboarding later in my teens, I wanted to be the top pro skater. I saw the movie Snow Day that had kids acting in it. I was like, I wanted to be an actor. And ironically is I would always have success and momentum in them. Like when I was a kid, I played soccer for like 10 years, got to the clubs, and I started doing really well and excelling. But then as soon as I excelled, I sort of lost interest a little bit. I don't know what it was as a kid, but I would do that. I would be like the best at it. And then I would be like, you know what? I want a new challenge. So then I got into skateboarding, and then I saw a buddy do a kickflip one day, and it blew my mind. I was like, how did he just flip that board? He was like 11 years old.
Sure.
So then I got into that, and then I started skating, and I skated for 10 years doing that. And I got to travel all over the world with Rob Dyrdek and Fantasy Factory from the MTV show, if you're familiar with Rob.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, a lot of things happened between
You were
them.
living like a rock star pretty much, huh?
Absolutely. I was on airplanes, getting per diems from Nike, free Nikes,
Nice.
traveling the world. Nice. So I would always I would always set a target and then get momentum in it. And then as soon as I would get to a high level, I would switch. And then I did the skating thing, and then I would switch. And then I realized, maybe I need to get into acting because I enjoy the diversity of different things.
Sure.
Tried that, ended up doing a commercial with Shaq, some small films. I did a Warner Brothers movie. Took my parents to the premiere and the whole thing. And I had all this momentum, but then I found myself after having all this momentum in my early 20s kind of depressed. I ran out of money, and I ran out of a sense of drive. I felt like somebody who was always, getting momentum in something, but then I would just stop or pivot or whatever. And I'm starting to see my friends, start to succeed in their early to mid 20s and late 20s. And I'm feeling like, damn, I had all these peak experiences, but they're not compounding to anything. Very hard to do anything with a skateboarding resume, or acting other than acting.
Sure.
And so, long story short, I went to a Tony Robbins seminar one time to try to change my life, as many do. I emptied my bank account, and I go to this Tony Robbins seminar, and I'm trying to figure out how to make my life work. What do I want to do? I know I want to do big things, but I don't know exactly what. And there was a guy sitting next to me who was probably about 27, 28 years old. And one of the exercises he had people do is they had to write down their current income and then their desired income.
Yeah.
And his current income was like 400 grand, which to me at that time, I was like, oh my God, how's somebody in their 20s making?
Yeah, blown away by that. Yeah.
I was just because on my sheet, my goal was to make 100, 10,000 a month. That was like a fantasy.
6 figures is like the big thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I see that's where he started, and his goal was to be at 1.2 million, so he could be doing 100,000 a month in take-home income. But I peeked over his paper, but I was kind of shy at the time, and I felt like everyone was way more successful than me. They don't know that I had a negative bank balance, and I'm sitting in the VIP row, But that was another lesson I learned, because I didn't just pay for a regular ticket. I paid to be in proximity to the higher level players.
Amazing. I love that word, man. Proximity. That's where the power is.
Proximity is power, absolutely. Yeah. And so I'm sitting next to this guy, and I peek over his paper and see it. And in my head, I'm like, God, I want to ask this guy. So I said, excuse me, if you don't mind me asking, bro, I don't mean to be rude or invasive, but I saw in your paper that you had written down your current income was, significant, and your dream income is $1 million. You're in your 20s. If you don't mind me asking, what do you do?
Sure.
And he goes, I'm in solar. I run like a solar sales team or whatever. I'm he was a regional manager at solar. long story short, within 30 days, I got me a solar outfit, and
You're rocking and
I
rolling.
was like, what do you do? How do you do it? I started working for Vivint Solar.
Yeah.
This is probably 2015-ish, and I start knocking on doors in the hot heat for 100% commission, selling $30,000 solar panels to people who do not want them and do not want you there for 100% commission. So I would knock 100 doors a day, and that was my sort of crash course into learning how to earn your keep. And then obviously it developed later. Solar, I got recruited to Tesla. Tesla was my last job. I was a top sales rep at the solar company and then at Tesla. And then one day at Tesla, I hit another rock bottom because I was the top in sales. Again, it was the same pattern, right? I was like the top at sales in solar, so I got recruited to Tesla. Yeah. I was the top at Tesla, and then I was like, well, I'm not going to like run the company. Like, where do I go from here? So I knew I wanted to have something more meaningful. And me and a girlfriend broke up, and then that was the impetus where I really decided to change my life, quit my job, and we can get into it. But that was the moment where I was like, F this. Like, I'm never going to put myself in a situation where I'm depressed, lost, or have my value predicated on somebody else controlling or a girlfriend who broke my heart at that time. So that was when I changed my life.
You consider that like a defining moment in your life?
100%, brother. Yeah. I was always, I'll be honest, I was a little bit of a playboy always, my whole life. But then when I met her, I just like, I'm sure we've all have different stories of it where you find the girl, you give her your heart, you're honest, you're loyal, you talk about marriage. Like, I gave her my whole everything. And as fate would have it, one day she called me out of the blue, cold turkey, and just wanted to end it. No explanation, no reason. I'm sure we've all had, many people can relate to stories like that. Yeah. And I was just devastated. And no amount of money or pursuing things meant anything. I was just so depressed by it for weeks. And then I ended up hiring a life coach, and that was the defining moment that just everything changed.
Amazing, amazing. And now let's talk about your podcast. I mean,
sure.
At what point did you transition from, and saying, because, I mean, you're talking about a complete shift here, right?
Radical shift.
I mean, you're going from, working for someone in sales, whatever, and then all of a sudden it's like, where did you get the idea that starting a podcast would be a good idea?
Yeah. So it actually was iterative. What I mean by that was when I was working at Tesla, I'm meeting all sorts of amazing men and women, right? Especially at that time, Tesla just came out. The types of clientele that were coming in to buy them were very refined and distinct. I know we were talking about earlier about a situation where that wasn't so much the case.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I met Bill Clinton's Air Force One pilot. He came and bought a Tesla from me, and we're sitting on test drives, and I'm just learning from all these CEOs and executives how they started, what they do. Ballparks of the scale of their business.
Sure.
And all of them were always like, dude, you're such a great salesperson. You're such a great that you should start your own thing. You're so good. Come work for me. So that would happen constantly. So that built my confidence, A. And then B, remember I told you earlier about knocking on doors in solar in the hot heat. That built my internal resilience to be unafraid to knock on doors, right? Whether it was a multi-million-dollar mansion and I'm like sitting there with a dry throat like, oh my God, I hope they don't, So now fast forward later, when I would meet all these big names, my confidence was building with high-level people. You learn the nuance that, they look at the watch, they look at the shoes, they look at how you talk. So you learn how to talk to higher-level people. So I didn't know that it would lead to a podcast, but I was building all these micro skill sets and strengths. And so the podcast started because when I told this on Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street's podcast, when he asked me about it. It was a crazy moment because he gave her a shout out. But when she broke up with me, I had never been broken up with ever in my life, right? My ego prided itself on that. So she broke up with me cold turkey. And the day she broke up with me, I was just devastated, man. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think. I started drinking and smoking and self-sabotaging, blew all my money, went into all this debt, started slacking off at Tesla. And but I remember at her place, she had a library set, and she was obsessed with Grant Cardone. And I had never heard about Grant Cardone other than through her. And so she was learning from Grant Cardone, and she was super into health and fitness, so she loved like Quest bars, and one of her guilty pleasures was eating hot Cheetos. Yeah. So you see where this is going, right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
in my young, maybe spiteful or inspired mind at that time, I was like, when she broke up with me, I was like, all right, you don't want my time. I didn't fight with her or anything when she broke up with me. I just accepted it, and the
Right.
fire burned inside. I don't know what to do with it.
Sure.
But I remember my last $850, I hired a life coach. Shout out Dave Thorpe. And we did a coaching session. And in that combustion of desperation and inspiration and just motivation, whatever you want to call it, we do a coaching sesh. And he said, Omar, if life was perfect, what would happen next? Forget about all the rules. Forget about where you are. Just forget about all that. If life was perfect, what would happen next? And I remember when he asked me that, it blew my mind because for the first time ever, it gave me the opportunity to open up the possibility. I think most people never take the actions because they never see the possibility. Like most people assume that the significant other or the business or the people they hire or the show or the podcast is going to be less than ideal. And so they never aim, right? I think Les Brown says most people don't aim too high and miss, they aim too low and hit. And so he's just telling me all this. I know I'm giving you a lot of context, but I'm just kind of trying to paint the picture to the audience of like how the perfect storm came together. And so yeah, he said if life was perfect, what would happen? I just said I would inspire millions of people. I would make millions of dollars, and I would make sure that my ex-girlfriend never forgets my fucking name. And I would make sure that whatever guy she's with is a fan of my show before they ever meet. I was just so red hot. Yeah. And so we wrote down a list of, he was like, well, what do you want to do? I was like, well, I love great conversations and I love meeting inspiring people. I didn't have the idea, to be honest, of a podcast. But what my coach, Dave Thorpe, again, shout out Dave, had me do is he was like, okay, let's start with what you know. You don't know what you want to do. You have vague ideas. Let's start with what you know and let it grow.
Yep.
So kind of like an ingredients list for making food. Instead of worrying about the entree, let's just take inventory of the ingredients, took a piece of paper, wrote down all these skill sets, and he was like, hey, it looks to me like you want to get paid to have great conversations and inspire people. So I was like, so does that mean I get a radio job? Right? To show you how naive I was about the podcast thing. And he's like, well, you could do YouTube. It's free, no barrier to entry. And he was like, any idea of who you want to do a video with? And I remembered the ex-girlfriend, Grant Cardone. She loved Quest bars and hot Cheetos. So my first year doing the podcast, I got Grant Cardone. I got the $1 billion creator of Quest Nutrition, Tom Bilyeu.
Tom, yeah.
And then I went on a mission to find the creator of hot Cheetos, the janitor who started it, who cold called the CEO of Frito-Lay, and got in touch with them and ended up, we could get into that, but it was crazy stories of how I got in touch with them. But my first year interviewed all three of them, and they ended up getting millions of views, and we're off to the races right away. And fast forward, that hot Cheetos, somebody saw the hot Cheetos interview, led to a script, 20th Century Fox developing it, Eva Longoria produced and directed it, and it premiered at the White House. And I was invited to the premiere by the creator of Hot Cheetos. Yeah.
Wow.
It's a crazy story, but I was just young and I was hungry as fuck. I don't know if I can cuss on this podcast.
You sure
but
can.
I was just so, like, the fire was so fucking hot. I was just like, she will never forget my fucking name, at that time.
Amazing.
And the motivation, obviously, like, after the first year, like, I wish her the best and everything. But at that time, I just had so much pain
that was a fire in your gut.
100%.
Yeah. It was that's so great. And that shift, that energized you to take your life really, when you look back, to the next level, which is what so many people, and you were talking about action. Are you kidding me? That is I believe that most people that sit around talking, wishing, dreaming, those people are great. We need those people, the visionaries, but we need more of the ones that take action, right? That actually follow up, create a mission, create a purpose with intention. So, I love the fact that, you were on it, you were coached and you jumped on it, and hey, you made it happen. Because I guarantee you, getting the dude from Cheeto was probably hard as hell.
Oh, it was insane. All of them were. Grant Cardone, I got a story for you there. I don't know if you've heard it, but Grant lives in Miami. He was in LA, in Beverly Hills, And I saw on his Instagram story that they were talking about this. They rented this huge house for like 200 grand a week in the hills. Like, it was just crazy, like epic spot. Or they were in Malibu, I think, at that time. And so on the background of his Instagram story, I heard Elena say, "Hey babe, are we still going to dinner at blah 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 such?" It was a place in Beverly Hills, and I know the spot, but it was very faint in the background. It wasn't like the focus of the Instagram story. And in my head, I thought, like, how am I going to get these guys? And I was like, fuck it, let me ask them. Right, solar. Let me just knock on their door. And so I drove in like 3.5 hours of traffic to chase them down. I saw that they were at an Equinox gym working out. I drove to the Equinox. I bought like a day pass. I went in. I tried to, and my plan was to look like I accidentally bumped into them and then ask them to be on the podcast. So I go to Equinox. They're not there. I'm like, fuck, they left. So then I'm like, dang. Then I hear about the dinner thing. So then I drove back, and then all the way back to Beverly Hills. I wait outside the restaurant, and I drive up, and I have at the time I had a 2013 Toyota Corolla white, like beat up, dirty, does not belong in Beverly Hills. You know what I mean? So and I couldn't afford valet at the time. Yeah. So I like park, you park like a couple streets away, and I walk all the way down. I go to the restaurant, and I'm like, shit, I'm here. What do I do now?
Sure.
And at the time, I'm like broke, lost, depressed, just fire in my belly. That's it. And the show doesn't exist yet, by the way. So I go to the restaurant. I'm waiting outside, and I go in, and I like tell the waitress, like, oh, is it okay if I use the restroom? I have my party's coming shortly. And my plan is when I go to the restroom to kind of scope out the place to see if he's there.
Sure.
And sure enough, he was there. I didn't want to interrupt the dinner. Right? I learned at Tesla about the power of being respectful. So I go outside and I just wait. And I end up waiting like 2.5 hours. Every time the door opens, somebody to leave, my heart's racing. It's not them. Door opens, my heart's racing. It's not them. So I'm going through these like mini heart attack, anxiety attacks for like 2.5 hours. You got to understand, I'm like now 6 hours into this thing. And in my head, this is so stupid. This doesn't make any sense, right? But the fire in me was just like, whatever it takes.
I love that. I love that, yes.
Whatever it takes. He finally comes out with Elena. No idea what I was going to say. And I just walk up to him. And I said, hey, excuse me, Grant. And he turns around. And he's like, hey, what's up, man? I said, hey, man, I just want to say my name's Omar. I saw you guys were in town. I just wanted to introduce myself and say thank you so much for all you do, right? And at the time, I'd listened to the 10X rule, all of his sales training, because I was in sales, right? So at that time, I was very familiar. So we start to talking, and he's with Elena. They also had quite a bit to drink, so they were pretty loose and relaxed, which I saw when they went in. That's why I waited. I was like, take as long as you want, right? So they come out. I go up to him, and I said, is it cool if I grab a photo with you and Elena? He was like, yeah, absolutely. Where are you from? So I told him, and then we start talking, and then I said, by the way, I said, I have a podcast that I'm about to launch. It's in post-production. It wasn't true at the time, but I needed an excuse for why I didn't have an audience, right? And from Grant, I learned to bring up all the objections in advance, right? Every reason he would say no to doing the podcast, I thought of while I was out there for 2.5 hours in advance. So I said, by the way, I know you guys are in town for a week, and I know you would normally never do this, and I would normally never ask, but I have a show that's in post-production that we're about to launch, and I would love to interview you on the show. If you'd be open for an hour, we'd come to you, be in and out in 30, 60 minutes, whatever you have. We'll promote the 10X book, like totally come to you, make it easy, we'll be in and out. And he looked at me, and he was like, did you really just drive 3.5 hours just to come outside the restaurant and pitch me to be on your show? And I said, yes, sir, I did. And then he just looked at me and kind of like laughed. And then I told him, I said, consider me the young man you once were with your dream. So he's like, all right, man. He's like, I like you, man. You got a business card? And you know how all of us, we all pretend we have a business card. We do the fake thing, even though we know we don't.
Yeah.
So I did that, and somehow I had one, right? I give it to him. He's like, oh, I like you. You're prepared. Long story short, he ends up connecting me with his assistant. And probably like 3-4 days later, we end up filming the podcast. And at that time, ended up being the most watched and downloaded Grant Cardone interview in the world. First take. I don't know how to explain that, right? Tom Bilyeu DM'd him like 14 times. He never replied. And then just the 15th time, he literally was just like, yeah, sure. Here's my assistant's phone number. Here's the address. And I remember we went down to film it at 4 in the morning in Beverly Hills. Creator of Hot Cheetos. He was doing speaking events at local churches. He was on a speaking tour. I went to every stop of the speaking tour, drove hours, every single one. When he would get off stage, I introduced myself the first time, pitched him, he said no. Second time, he said no. Third time, he said no. Finally, the fourth time, I didn't even go up to him. He came up to me after. He was like, "You're a persistent son of a bitch, you know that?" And same thing. I said, "Consider me the young man you once were." He was once a janitor at Frito-Lay, never made more than $3 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And he did that with the CEO. He cold called him
Sure.
to bring up the idea of Hot Cheetos.
Sure.
So I know that those guys know the seat I'm in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of needing that one person in a senior position to give you the opportunity. Yeah. So I always just spoke to that. That ended up being the most watched and downloaded Hot Cheetos interview ever, and it led to all these things. So, yeah, there's so many stories, but just in a nutshell,
that's amazing.
That was the attitude.
Just the fact that you were so driven, you were so hungry, and sometimes
I was starving.
Right. So sometimes, I mean, people get in a position where they complain, they whine, and it's like, oh, I'm in a rut, but they don't go out there and take the action like you did.
Yeah.
And I try, I've coached up to this point right around 12,000 and something men.
Wow.
And what happens many times is that all they do is complain about the rut that they're in, and they're in the same place that they were 2, 3, 5 years ago.
Right.
And I ask one simple question. Have you gone out there and taken any kind of action? Have you networked, shook hands? Have you exposed yourself, going out there? Do people know who you are? Mm-hmm. 99% of the time is like, yeah, no, I don't have time for that.
Yeah,
but the thing is, you went out there, you were so hungry, you drove, you put in the time, the effort, you built tremendous resiliency and tenacity. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that is part of, I guarantee you, that is part of who you are right now.
Absolutely.
It's in you. If they took away everything from you, you have the capability to step up and win at the game again.
Right. All over again. Absolutely. And to add to your point is, I think one of the biggest things that I've seen with a lot of clients that we help as well is, you get a unique ticket to all these different industries and all these different things. And a lot of times, I heard this quote once, I'll never forget it. People don't have business problems. They have personal problems that reflect in their business.
Yes.
Right? Because there is no such thing as a business problem. There's only a personal problem that you don't know how to manage, and so it leaks into your business.
Yes.
And I think so many people are afraid to take action and not get a ROI. So I'm a huge proponent on take 100 actions. For every one of these stories that I have about getting a big name, I have way more of names I didn't. I mean, I have stories where I tried to get Seinfeld. I won't say what studio, but I snuck into a studio lot, and there was like a charity event, and I ended up meeting Jerry Seinfeld to try to get a pod with him, Or when I tried to get Joe Rogan, I was like, oh, what do I do? How do I do this? What are the... But I have a thing where it's like, we talk to it with our team, like bullet to our head thinking. If you had to do it, no matter what, gun to your head, you have to do it or you die. How would you do it? Your brain thinks of so many different things than it would if you're just in an air-conditioned office thinking, should I email the guy?
Sure.
Right? Should I? Your brain goes, who's his videographer? Who's his assistant? Who's his sibling? Who's somebody who works for him? Who's his right hand? I ended up going to a comedy show where he was performing, and I was like, oh, let me just ask him to be on the podcast after the comedy show.
Sure.
Right? It didn't end up working. I mean, I went to the show, I met him, and I mean, obviously we didn't get the episode, but I rolled the dice.
Yeah.
And so the willingness to take action, even if it's a roll of the dice, you only need 1 or 2 of those to hit for 30, 40 actions to get a disproportionate return. And I think so few people realize that. Yep. They want to, like, oh, if I talk to him, will I get this? Well, I don't know how to approach it, or I don't know how to. Even with Cardone, I had no idea what to say, but feel the fear and do it anyways.
Love it.
That's a motto in our world.
Love it. And I think of podcasts. I mean, I started. I was a cop, and I started the podcast where I would be working 12, 14-hour shifts, and most of my career was in narcotics, undercover SWAT teams. I was part of DA task forces, and I would get home at 8, 9 o'clock at night with my family, spend time with my family, and then bring on guests at literally 2, 2:00 in the morning to get up and be in lineup the next morning at 5:00 in the morning for a major search warrant.
Wow.
And I did that all the time. So it's that drive inside of you. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I mean, I had a little recorder and a mic, and I would put people through Zoom, and then I started going, knocking on doors like you. I mean, I have a story similar to, and it was my first podcast. I don't know. I try to get Navy SEALs on, people that were, manly, and I chased people down a lot.
Yeah.
Consistency. Just they thought that I was nuts. So I love that fire, that you were so hungry, and you were taking these actions.
Yes.
And now I'll give you a little. Recently, one of our interviews, I had Pete Hegseth on, about a year and a half ago. And one of that podcast went viral. And, I didn't know he was going to be, we're in the position that he was now, in the government. So with that said, sometimes what you do now, it may not hit now. It may not, it's not relevant to the moment.
Yes.
But boy, a year, 2 years down the road, big things can happen.
I can't tell you how many times that's been true. I mean, I'll give you an example. When I interviewed Tom Bilyeu, there was this kid. His name was Jeremy, and he was from, I believe, Canada. And he was a 17-year-old kid. He reached out to me. And at the time, I did consulting. I did like paid consulting calls.
Yeah.
But there was like a 17-year-old kid. I was like, don't worry about the fee. He's young, hungry, whatever. I hopped on a call with him. And he's like, dude, I want to do what you do. Like, it's so awesome. Like, what's your best advice? So I'm telling him, I was like, dude, just take radical and perfect action. Like the whole thing, like gun to your head thinking. Like, if it had to happen, what would the attempt look like? Because the way I see it is somebody's going to have what you want. Your dream house, your dream wife, your dream podcast, your dream car, your dream income. And they're made of the same skin, flesh, blood, bones as me and you. So the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, has to give it to somebody. Somebody has to drive the car. Somebody has to love the girl. Somebody has to have the show, right? Why not you, right? And so for me, it's about being the individual that is deserved of the thing, but internally. And so I'm telling him this. Of course, he's a 17-year-old kid, so he can only digest so much of it. So he ends up making this website called something to the effect of like, TomBilyeu, right? And he made a full-on website, and it had reviews from like, I believe it was like friends and family on why they should work for him. He made a template for all these ideas.
Yeah.
So he ends up sending it to Tom, gets hired, ends up working for Tom for years. And because Tom had a podcast, he's meeting all these big guests. So later down the road, when I wanted big guests, that 17-year-old kid turned into the plug who had all the intros.
Wow.
So he would just send me
Beautiful.
so many guests. Easy. We'd get big names all the time. I didn't know it at the time. He was just a 17-year-old kid with questions. Yeah. That ended up leading to him connecting me with Jason Waller, who then led to me connecting to Andrew Tate, which then led to all these, huge opportunities and, obviously, business and all that. And we've been able to generate millions of dollars in our business and all these different things we do. But so many of it came from like little things like that. I have so many stories like that where somebody today, you don't know if he's the right hand to a huge player or a door opens or ends up, in a bigger position in the government or whatever it is later. Right. So, yeah.
So you really believe in it's not necessarily always what it can do for you now, but I mean, it can open doors in the future, right? I mean, that's a big takeaway here.
Yeah.
People are always about instant gratification. They want it right now. And if it's not performing now, then they think that what they're doing is not worth anything. Mm-hmm. But I'm a huge believer that you start, you start little by little. Mm-hmm. You start putting the time and effort, and eventually it'll come.
Yeah, and it compounds.
Yes.
Time is magic. I actually, I had interviewed John Paul DeJoria, so the billionaire John Paul DeJoria. Yes. He's the founder of Patron Tequila, Paul Mitchell Shampoo and Conditioner, multi-billionaire of 2 companies. And when I interviewed him, he had just sold Patron to Bacardi for $5.1 billion a couple months prior. And so I'm sitting with him in his office in Beverly Hills, and it was pretty surreal to even be in the room. Keep in mind, a few years ago, I was like a broke, lost kid who got broken up with. Now I'm in this like the 45th wealthiest man in America's office on my show. Makes no sense to me. But at the time, I was just so driven to make it happen. It's funny. I'm talking to him, and I said, what's the biggest difference between guys that play at the 6-figure level, 7-figure level, 8-figure level, 9-figure level? Like mindset-wise, what's the shift as you ascend up to the billionaire level? And he goes, time horizon. The only difference, obviously you could say action, you could say a great team, you could say organization, you could say discipline, all these things, but it's how you think about time and how you use your time. It's the only resource we have, right? Everything else can be changed, interchanged, but time is a finite, limited resource. And so he told me, I said, what do you mean? He goes, think about it. He goes, Jeff Bezos was tens of billions of dollars in debt for decades before he ended up being the wealthiest man in the world. He goes, think about, for example, on a practical level, right? When you think about billionaires, they think in terms of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. When you think about guys that do hundreds of millions, they probably think in terms of a decade or two. When you think about dudes who make, tens of millions, they think probably in a span of 7, 8, 9, 10 years. When you think about dudes who make millions, they probably think, 3 to 5 years to 6 years. Dudes 6 figures, they want to make 6 figures a year. Dudes who make 10 grand, they want to make 10 grand a month. People who want to control their wage, right? Well, minimum wage, what do I get paid per hour? You see? So the lowest paid people in the world focus on what they get paid per hour.
Sure.
The wealthiest people in the world think about decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. And literally their perception of time to money, as you put it out there, you start to see like the people that are like, well, what's my wage now, today, right?
Yeah.
What per hour? I want a guarantee. That's the smallest guarantee you can get.
Yeah.
Are you willing to eat shit for 5 to 10 years to have something down the road? So I thought that was a huge conception, and it relates to what we're saying about time.
What do you see more now in the world that we live in our society when it comes down to people not understanding that? To me, it's a sense of detachment in many ways from what's real, and then from what's possible, right? So most people, they live in this sense of, okay, I know that if I work X amount of hours, I'm going to generate X amount of dollars.
Right.
Okay. However, this is, going back to what you were saying, it's kind of like that in their mind, it's that mathematical formula. 1 hour plus 2 hours equals equals X amount of dollars.
Right.
And I see that there's a stop there. You speak to that type of person, and then you speak to the people that are trending higher, and they're focused on progression, on sequencing their life to the next level. For me, my experience has been, and I'll get back to the question here, my experience has been that when those people that are constantly, hour marking, people that are counting every dollar per hour, they get stuck in that rut. But those who sit back and they look forward into the future and they say, my time and effort here right now could duplicate, threefold, fourfold. It could expand and grow in the future for millions and millions of dollars, right? Where do you, what's the discrepancy? What's the gap in your mind, between those who sit around counting hours and those who really look forward and have a mission and are working now to build that?
Vision. One word, it's vision. Everyone's vision is different, but some people's vision is pay bills at the end of the month. Some people's vision is have their name on a building. Vision, right? Without a vision, they say in the Bible, without a vision, people perish. I think that's the difference, right? It goes back to what we said earlier about, most people don't aim too high and miss. They aim too low and hit.
Yeah.
And so most people's vision is pay the bill, right? Or get to here or get to here. And I think people who think in longer time horizons, when you have a big vision, you're not so worried about, even if it's stressful, the money this month or whatever. Like, I'll give you an example. When I started the show, oh man, I was constantly in debt. Growing the show, I was probably I got to the tune of almost over 100,000 in debt, which now isn't as crazy sounding as it did back then. Back then, it felt like $10 million of debt.
Sure.
It's just an impossible number.
Sure.
But it's because of the disproportionate investment down the road. My vision was so big that I was like, fuck it, I'll spend any expense. Because what's the alternative? Let me just sit at home and wait till I can afford to fully produce a podcast.
Yeah. Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
when the
it's
fire's gone with it. So whatever. So if I got to take a credit card, if I got to borrow from here, if I got to do whatever it takes. My attitude was whatever it takes, push it down the road, because there will come roads of disproportionate returns, right? There was times where, like I said, I was like multiple six figures in debt. It got really bad. But fast forward years later, there's times where I would have six-figure days, paydays, right? But had I not been waiting to eat shit for a decade and do it, and my parents thought I was nuts. People around me like, what are you doing interviewing people? Like now it's normal for a podcast. When I started, it was not normal. It was not normal for people to be making money doing it. But to me, I didn't care, right? Even in a certain context today, I still think I'm so early in the journey that I'm not so worried about what I'm pocketing now. I mean, obviously as a business, yes, but it's more about what are we building? What are we moving towards?
your empire.
Exactly, because that vision will give you the comfort where you have the discomfort of the cash now. If my vision is just like, hey, just get to the end of the month or get to the end of the year, then yeah, why are we going to finance a trip to Romania to interview Andrew Tate? It's not in the budget.
Sure.
You see what I'm saying? So, yeah, that's kind of how I look at it.
Talk to me a little bit about discipline in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Do you consider it an important part of who you are?
I think it is important, and I think for me, for example, it's all about priorities, right? So there's been seasons in my life. For example, now I'm getting focused back on fitness because I went through a season where that slipped tremendously. But there's other times where, people could say, I was the most undisciplined about eating or working out, but nobody could say I was undisciplined about getting podcasts, running the business, or doing what we're doing on that front. So I think discipline is integral, and I think where people struggle is prioritizing it, right? Because what do you do when there's 10 things to discipline, right? How do you discipline getting 8 hours? Like you mentioned earlier, say I want to be disciplined and sleep for 8 hours. Well, I got to take that 8 hours from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So am I going to take it from the gym,
Mm-hmm.
or am I not going to take it from the gym? Am I going to take it from time with my family?
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to take it time from playing video games to decompress, right? So I feel like it's kind of like I look at discipline kind of like a Rubik's Cube sometimes.
Yeah.
And ideally, you want to solve all 6 sides of the Rubik's Cube, but sometimes you solve 3 or 4 and it throws off 1 or 2, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a balancing act,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah, so I think it's human beings. I heard this TED Talk one time, and his first question was, do you guys think human beings are a finished product or a work in progress? Right? And all human beings are a work in progress.
For
so
sure.
I feel like discipline is the ingredient for that progress.
Throughout your journey here in the podcast world,
Mm-hmm.
tell me about building habits
Mm-hmm.
from you've learned so much from individuals, and I'm
Yes.
sure that they had tremendous habits,
Mm-hmm.
because I believe that without good habits, you're not growing.
Correct.
I mean, it's impossible. So in your own life, how have you applied these specific habits that you've learned? Because I'm sure you've learned a lot from speaking to different people.
Yep.
How have you applied these habits into your life?
Systems. I'm not naturally left to my own devices. I would smoke cigars, eat Cheetos, and sleep until noon. That's my natural default. And so the workaround around that was building systems to where it automates it, right? Like when you think of, for example, let's take professional athletes, right? People are like, oh my God, how are they so fit? How are they so disciplined? How are they so this? I saw an interview one time, and the guy was like, I saw one with an actor too, the guy from Wolverine, what's his name? Hugh Jackman.
Oh, yeah.
They were like, how are you so disciplined with your diet for the X-Men movie? Your fitness is amazing, and you're like, how are you so
That dude's
disciplined?
a stud, man, when he's cut up for that.
Right? Yeah. They're like, how are you so disciplined?
Yeah.
He goes, well, it helps. They pay me $20 million a year to make the movie.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
because then you get trainers and systems and all that. But whether you have money or not, the system can be, for example, with us, like I have my assistant. She runs my life, my schedule. That way I know, like, okay, got to cut off this, got to start this, got to do that. But if you come to in my world, like my team always laughs because I got a chef that cooks the meals. I got the housekeeper on her system. I got the somebody to walk the dogs. I got a team that handles the production. We got stuff set up for every kind of thing you can think of. I even have a lady with the laundry who comes and picks up the laundry, folds and does dry cleaning, drops it at the house. Sometimes I'll literally have like the dry cleaner, the chef, they're all at the house working,
Yeah.
because left to my own devices, I won't be disciplined naturally. But if I have those systems in place, and even, that's with money, but even before money, there's little things you can do to build systems around it. That way you don't have to think about it. The more you can automate systems, like professional athletes, they have training from this to this. They have somebody that measures stuff from this to this. I bet you half of professional athletes wouldn't be as disciplined or as fit as they are if they didn't have systems that keep that enforcement going.
That's a great point.
I think people, and then also, like, I find that the ideal discipline is where there's not a lot of resistance per se, where it's automated, right? For example, when I was younger, one of my buddies, he was a trainer, and so he lived next to me, and I hated going to the gym. So I told him, I was like, hey, can you just knock on my door and just like take me to the gym? So every morning at like 7:30 a.m., he'd knock on my door, because left to my own devices, I wouldn't go. So I would find that. So different strokes for different folks. But for me, that's always helped, is just having systems in place to keep it automated. You don't think about it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Having systems is so important, especially when you start really moving and trending up, right?
Right.
Because it's just important to be able to have things where, you don't have to think about them. They're just happening for you, and they're kind of leading you, throughout that maze of life. For sure.
And the concept that I've actually been really, for whatever reason, I'm one of those guys that can like talk about one thing or think about one thing forever, right? You're familiar, I'm sure, with the concept of entropy.
Yes.
Right? Entropy, for people who may or may not have context, is this idea that everything in the universe and biology, everything tends to trend towards chaos and disorder, naturally. Your house, if you don't clean it, naturally will get messy. Your relationship, if it's not organized, will naturally turn chaotic. Your kids, if not disciplined, naturally chaotic. Your diet, so everything in the universe is already trending, even if you do nothing, is trending downward. And so it's not even. It's not like even.
Yeah, it's a universal pull towards negativity downwards. Yes,
naturally.
It's automatic.
Right. When you come home or lay in bed, most people don't go, what a beautiful day I had today. Man, I feel so good. Most people go home and they go, fuck, I got to pay this bill. Fuck, I got to do that. Shit, I got to do this. How am I going to move this here? Fuck, I got to do this. Oh, I got to call this. Fuck, she's bitching about this, right? That's most of us, right?
Always.
And so you have to like fight that with like, okay, what are we grateful for here today? I'm grateful for this. You have to be really intentional. It's an uphill battle. So I don't know, that concept for me helps, because I'm always aware that, everything. Think about finances, right? How many times you could have money in the bank and just gets eaten and eaten and eaten unless you have systems for accounting. Time, right? If you're sitting talking with somebody and you're not monitoring the clock. So everything in the universe is trending towards that. And it's so the awareness of that uphill battle, I think, makes you fight a lot harder than most people who stay neutral and go, well, if I don't do anything bad, everything will be fine. No. Things are already, if you do nothing, you can't be neutral on a moving train.
Hey guys, we'll get back to the video here. I want to introduce Man of War Elite Performance. It took us almost 2 years to develop this. We've been testing it over and over again, and we believe we have an amazing product here. First off, the EAA for recovery, the best of the best. We have a tremendous amount of Aquamin, 3 times the closest competitor. If you don't know what Aquamin is, research it. It's a great recovery tool. Also, here we have creatine. A lot of junk out there. A lot of junk. Protein. You want to talk about best tasting protein? It took us 16 different times to work out the flavor in this and make it the cleanest possible. This is a chocolate flavor, the best chocolate flavor that I've ever had, and I think that you will ever have. This is 24 grams of protein per scoop, and it's a very, very clean tasting protein. We'd love for you to purchase this, try it out, and let me know. So let's stay under this umbrella here. Clarity of mind, peace of mind, living a life that you can be peaceful with yourself. We talk here a lot about tranquility of mind. For me, my background comes, I've done, a lot of Zen meditation. To me, I start my day with Zen meditation no matter what.
Is it like TM?
No, it's a little bit different. It's more of a Japanese traditional type of meditation. Transcendental meditation is a little bit different. We focus on just our breath and being present, and it stills to the point where I've studied Zen Buddhism. when I was coming up in the martial arts for a very long time under a very high-level Roshi, which is like an ordained monk. And that changed my life in every way, shape, or form.
Wow.
I'm a Christian man. However, it took me to that border. I was literally about to shave my head to become a monk and be ordained as a monk, but I was 2 weeks away from that. But then I had a little bit of, there was some mixed between the two religions, and I said, you know what, I'm not doing this. But the learning that I had, the learning experiences that I had, being able to sit and I hate to use the word meditate because that's not really a word that's connected to that. It's more sitting in oneness with your breath.
What does that routine look like for the audience?
We typically in the morning, and I've talked about it a few times, I have a certain area in my home where it's just, we call it a safu and a safutan. A safu is a square pillow, and then there's a round pillow that goes on top of it, which the idea is a lot of people, and I want to stay in this topic for a moment because I think it's relevant to what we're discussing here. A lot of people think that meditation or just chilling and counting their breaths and just trying to be tranquil is going to calm them. And it does to some effect, it does. However, Zen meditation is going to war with your demons, literally going to war with your demons and not engaging in we like to call it the little whispers in the ears, right? The temptation and all this monkey mind that we have, because that's, as human beings, we have monkeys in our mind, always here and there and there. Like you just mentioned it, thinking about the bills and whatever. So,
yeah.
In the way that the process looks like is you sit against usually, we were always taught to be facing a wall. There's usually incense burning. I have what we call a ring. A ring is just a little bell that you hit and you just kind of fall into that stillness. I have a timer. Usually I sit for 15 minutes. Good posture. We have you can sit in a half lotus, which is one leg crossed, or full lotus, which is two legs. And then you have a very erect back. It's like you're battle ready, man. This is not like, you're like battle ready. You're centered and postured. So you start controlling your breath. And then you become one with that breath. And as you advance, at the beginning levels, you're counting 1 breath, 2 breath, 3 breaths. And the idea is, if you catch yourself counting those breaths, then you're already thinking. So you got to start over. So you really never get past 2 or 3.
Sure.
Right? However, as you get better and better, you just breathe and you just become that breath. And you get into a state of mind where, for me, it has in combat, as a police officer, in very, very crazy narcotics situations that were highly engaged, highly violent. It's helped me dramatically. In business, helped me dramatically. So kind of going back to this, when you have these systems in place, it's wonderful because you are literally clearing your mind of all the other things that you have to think about. So kind of going back to my question, how do you find that peace, that clarity in your life? Because, you're moving around, you're traveling, you're interviewing, you're doing this, you're that, and you're building systems because systems aren't built for you. You have to put those systems together.
Correct.
So how in your life are you finding that peace and that state of mind and that tranquility?
It's funny. I started off doing TM, it was transcendental meditation, and then it evolved to my own sort of hybrid. I wouldn't even call it a signature system, but my own intuitive. Like I'll just set a timer for 20 minutes, and then depending on the nuance of the day, it's just quiet meditation. It's not guided, and I'll just breathe and I just sort of do my own internal meditations. I'm pretty good at that. I'm not so consistent at that, to be honest, but what I'm incredibly consistent as is having multiple of those in 5 to 10 minute increments a day.
Excellent.
So sometimes, like say, for example, there's a gap between a call I have or something like that, and there's 15 minutes. I'll literally set a timer for 5 to 10 and in just dead silence, and I just need it to kind of like a compass, right? You know how a compass needs to recalibrate and you recenter or clean? And I find that helps tremendously. Another thing that has is walking. Like literally, as simple as that sounds, people talk about the gym, all this stuff. Of course, that stuff's great. But for me, walking has been tremendous. And sometimes I'll just do 30-minute to 1 hour walks. And you can just think through things. You can just like observe things. And I got it from John Paul, actually, DeJoria. I asked him a similar question. And I asked him if he meditates and stuff. And he says he doesn't. But what he does do is he'll set timers for like 5 to 10 minutes. And he'll just like observe and try to not think. So the natural tendency is when you're looking at something to look and go, shit, I got to do this. Shit, I got to do that. So he goes, sometimes I'll just look at a tree and go, wow, that's a tree. Yeah. What a beautiful tree. Yeah. And just breathe. And just because the brain is so, actually, it's funny. I just did a brain map last week with my friends here in Florida. It's called Brain Code Health Centers. So shout out to them. And they did a brain map. And you know how there's like the alpha, beta, gamma, like all these different things. So I didn't realize that you can actually see them, like you can like actually measure them. And they actually refer to types of waves in the mind. So you can literally control what you're tapped into, kind of like a heartbeat in the hospital. It goes up and down. Yeah. So they were showing me how like just by having it on, just by changing how I think, just thinking, right? Nothing's moving.
Sure.
It changes your whole neurochemistry just by how you're thinking.
Crazy. I didn't know that. Yeah.
And so a lot of people, they hear about it and they go, yeah, like meditation, sure, it calms you down. But when you see the fact that like, okay, I meditate and you can see the squiggly line going from this to like this, you're like, whoa, you can tap into brainwaves and everything comes from you, right? Life happens from us, not to us. And I don't know, I just thought that was fascinating. So what I try to do is I have the mental mind map of that, right? I try to take a mental pulse of my own version of where I'm at. Oh, shit's stressful or this is going on, so I'm here. So I go, okay, cool. I need some of these mellow waves, right? So just the mental imagery of that helps. But yeah, mini meditations are probably my best antidote to
your go-to. Awesome.
Yeah.
Purpose. So it's a confusing topic.
Sure.
But how do you translate purpose in your life? I mean, what is it to you?
Well, I find living by priority is really the only thing you can control, right? There's a great expression. It says you can't control the cards you're dealt, just how you play the hand. So for me, I try to, people say, what's my purpose or what's my mission? I think of it kind of like when I was a kid, right? When I was a kid, and like many of us, when you're young, I think, let me retract. When you're older, people will say, like maybe some of your clients, well, I don't know what my purpose is. Like, yeah, maybe I have money, but what's my purpose? Or maybe I want to start a business, but am I just doing it for money? Right? What's my purpose? What's my purpose? What's my passion? What's my what's my calling? Right? We've all gone through this, right? Myself included. But when I think back to that, I think about being a kid. How many 5 and 6 year olds go like, "Hey, mom, what's my purpose? Hey, mom, what's my passion?" It never happens.
Yeah.
It's a construct of the adult mind that has, in my opinion, hallucinated that it's going to come from some extrinsic thing. When you're a kid, how do you find your purpose? You play basketball, you play soccer, you try gummy bears, you try talking to Stacy, you try talking to Amanda, you try talking to your friend Kyle. I don't like him, I don't like her. Oh, I do like her. I don't like these gummy bears. I don't like this video game. You try things. You try things very fast. What about this? What about that? What about that? And naturally, you learn what you like and what you don't like, and you find your purpose and your momentum that way. I think the same applies when you're an adult. I heard this study that was done recently where they said that more people try new activities from age 0 to 15 than they do from 15 to 50. Think about that. From 0 to 15, you'll try more sports, more activities, more new things, more active, right? And then as you get older, you're like, well, this is what I've always known. Well, I'm not a basketball guy. I'm not a tennis guy. Well, I've never really been much into that. Yeah. You don't want to try things yet. You want to find your purpose. Yeah. I think purpose more like a match, right? Like a match on a matchbox. Like you just go rub it up against a few things. Try this, try that, try that. And when it lights on fire, then you'll find your fire. I think most people hold the match and they're afraid to rub it up against things. When you're a kid, you'll be like, okay, let me try this, let me try that, let me try that. Oh, it lit it, boom, that's my purpose. My purpose is to be the best soccer player in school or to get a scholarship or to go here, right? It's iterative. But when you're older, most people hold the match and light themselves on fire, right? And then they wonder, like, well, what's going to light this on fire? What's going to light me up? I don't know. Go try things. My best advice to people to find their purpose is try things. Every single person I've ever met that is living their dream or their purpose will tell you they didn't intellectually think about it. They weren't walking around one day and went, oh, I figured it out. I got my purpose.
Yeah.
They did it through trying things, through meeting the guy, through shaking the hand, through starting the business and failing, and then trying the next thing, and then that worked. And so I think of purpose kind of like that. You got to go try things and see what sets your soul on fire. And when you know, you know.
Fear is a destroyer of men,
Mm-hmm.
from my perspective.
Yes.
It destroys dreams. It is contagious.
Mm-hmm.
And even at times, it is really evil.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on fear, and also how have you been able to overcome fear? I mean, at the beginning of this podcast, your heart's beating. Grant Cardone is coming out. And people, there's a lot of people that you say it where, hey, I was there and I pushed, but there's the majority of people that would not even think about doing that because they're too scared. So, talk to me a little bit about fear.
I love this topic. So for me, fear is something I expect. Right? It's like an expected guest. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's an expected guest that comes early, usually. Sure. And so instead of looking at fear like, man, I hope I don't get nervous or I hope I don't get whatever, I look at it as, first of all, if you really want to get way abstract, right? I thought of this concept one time. I may have been under the influence, may or may not. But I thought of this concept of fear is a social construct, right? Language is a social construct made up by man. Right? So when we say the word fear, it is a construct that was made up to describe a sensation. God didn't go, here's the word fear, and this is universally going to be understood, right? So we all just feel things, and words are our best attempt to explain what we feel. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. Mm-hmm. So when we say fear, we're really describing an internal sensation. Mm-hmm. There's this concept in Carillion photography, right? Carillion photography is where basically you can see the body and the temperature of the body and different things going on in the body. And in Carillion photography, they did this study where I believe it was with the Rolling Stones. And they showed in Carillion photography a parallel between somebody having an anxiety attack and a rock star before they're about to go on stage. And it looks exactly the same. Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
So what one person calls an anxiety attack and nervous and fear,
that's right.
Another person goes, oh, this is excitement for the show. Let's fucking rock it. Mm-hmm. But because I'm defining it as fear, right, the label you give the experience becomes the experience more than the actual experience.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
100%.
And so I think people habitually becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Mm-hmm. And so now they live what you speak. You cannot speak words of defeat and expect victory, right? So I think that's the preface up front. The second part, on a more practical level, is one of my favorite books ever. I mentioned it earlier. It's by Dr. Susan Jeffers. It's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways. Feel the fear and do it anyways. And in the book, she basically talks about this concept that fear is your go button. Like when the anxiety shows up, that's when it's time to rock. Mm-hmm. Because that actually is what gives you the energy. It's what gives you the presence. When I went to interview Andrew Tate, I'm not going to lie, if there was Carillion photography looking at me, I was nervous as shit. Mm-hmm. This is one of the most viral guys in the world. I flew the whole production team to Italy, and then from Italy to Romania. We rigged up this whole room. He's the number one most wanted guy ever. The morning of, he was on the front page of the BBC. I'm like, fuck, I'm going to go interview this guy. And I had a whole bunch of other challenges we were dealing with. Transparently, ironically, me and my significant other broke up that morning, right? Just to give you context.
I hit you right in the face right there.
Yeah. Just to give you context of how much is, you talk about anxiety, fear, whatever people want to label it. Yeah. I had a lot of it, whatever you want to call it. No sleep the night before. I'm nervous as shit, whatever you want to call it. And but when he came, it was fucking go time, and I was on. We did a 5-hour podcast. And I find, and she talks about in the book, that a lot of times anxiety and presence is actually a gift. See, a lot of us think of that as a curse. I actually think of it as a gift from God, because when you have that, think about how much more alert you are, mm-hmm. right? When you're relaxed, you miss things. You overlook things. You don't notice. But when you've got fear and anxiety, you're paying attention to the nuance. Who's that guy? What's going on here? So it makes you hyper aware. So actually, when I started to look at it like that, I actually look at it as like a blessing, or like a drug almost, a focus drug, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because that's when you're most alive, right? Is when you're most, most of your senses are activated.
Sure.
So when I see it that way, now fear, see how like even the last 5 minutes of talking about it, the word fear doesn't even do those emotions justice, right? And then the last part of it is I have always found that my life always has gotten better when I push through the fear. It's always better on the other side, even if it doesn't work. Even if it doesn't work, even if you try to do the deal and it doesn't work, because you grew as a person, it's another door you knocked on, right? And so for me, I know that all my competitors feel the same fears I do. A lot of my competitors feel fearful to interview Andrew Tate, or feel fearful to interview all these people. Sure. But to me, I know that a few people will push through that fear. And I guess my show's called The Passionate Few because of that, right?
There you
go. I want to be the guy that is afraid to do it and did it anyways, because that's where the biggest payday is in many a context.
Yeah, moving forward, even with that feeling, I mean, that's courage, right? You know, courage is not the lack of fear. It's not the lack of that sensation, right? I mean, courage is knowing that it's there, but still moving forward. Now, one of the things, I mean, I've read this over and over again in so many books. I'm an avid book reader, but is the fact that 95% of the time on the other side of fear is not even what you expected. It's never as bad as what you expected.
Yeah.
You know, it's always a mind fuck. And, you know, going back to clarity of mind and controlling your mind, because I'm big into commanding your mind, and and it's exactly that. You know, fear is that sensation, and it stops you from creating and from doing things. Because if you were so fearful, you would have never gone up to Grant Cardone, and if you would have let it take over, you would have never done the, you know, Andrew Tate thing and and all the successes that you've had in your life. And the fact that you were courageous and you overcame those fears, and all of a sudden now you're like, hey, this is a normal feeling. It's okay. We move forward in spite of it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the whole goal. And just like in law enforcement, man, in narcotics undercover, are you kidding me? I mean, you know, you're in a SWAT, you're sitting there in a SWAT briefing, and they're telling you this guy's murdered, you know, 13 people, and, you know, he has grenades in his house, and he has this, and you're like, wait a minute, what? And you're thinking, oh man, you know, and then you take off your helmet and you have your wife and your daughter and your son's picture in it, and you're saying, oh man, you know, so your heart is boom, 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 boom. When it's go time, like you said, it's go time. Highly focused, right? Like a laser beam. So, you know, I love that.
Question on that. What's like the scariest or craziest moment from your life in law enforcement? Is there one story in particular where you're like, fuck, I might not make it home for dinner?
Man, there's been so many. And one of my, I think, one of the experiences that I had, so I'll give you a little, I was with DEA and the DEA, the Tactical Diversion Squad, and I did my time there, and then they called me back to the road. I was being promoted to sergeant soon and whatever, and I didn't want to go back in the road, honestly. I was like, I wanted to stay in a federal task force, but regardless. And I remember literally 2 days after going back to the road, and I was working for one of the most violent cities in the United States. I mean, this city is still considered very high violence.
Where was it?
Riviera Beach, which is literally like an hour, 45 minutes from here. Okay, and it's a low socioeconomic class for the most part, outside of their beautiful island that they have there. It's tough, man. You know, I saw things there in the first 3 months that most cops maybe never see in their entire career.
Like what?
Oh, I've had kids' brains splattered on my hand. When I get into this, I get a little emotional because of things that I've seen and experienced, you know, drive-by shootings, little kids and my hands, like my arms here, and they're like bleeding out and brain pouring out. And I am the last person that they see. I've had people jump out of my grip 21 stories down and you know, to kill themselves. I've had people, you know, you walk into a room, you got guys hanging, and you have to run, and you realize, oh, he's still sort of breathing. You carry him, and, you know, you try to save his life. I've had oh man, I've been shot at. I've been made as a narc. I've fought guys in the middle of nowhere in alleyways that are completely dark. My backup took like 3 minutes to get there. I've been literally. I could tell you stories, but
Wow.
I'll give you one for example here that for this. So it was just to show you how jaded you can become, and that mind, your mindset is so important in everything that you do. I remember we were. It was a call, and we were working in a special task force. It was the silent night task force. It was for the holidays. Typically, they will initiate this task force about 3 months prior to the holidays, and then through the holidays, right? So, we want to prevent high violence and things like that. So we're stacked in an SUV, like a Suburban. I was my SWAT commander, and then 3 SWAT guys, and there's multiple of these SUVs throughout the area. But we get a call, a guy beating his girlfriend badly, about to kill her, and we get to the house. This is very, very. I remember it's like a 1 o'clock in the morning call. We're exhausted. We want to go home. The next thing is we approach, lights out. We see blood all over the trunk of the car. And the next thing we see is him drag the woman in the car, and then he jumps in and they take off right when we're there. So here we are chasing this car. We chase it for about 25 minutes. We're in the middle of a highway. It's not your regular I-95 here, but it's the Beeline Highway, which is kind of like all it has is trees and woods around it. And this car pulls out literally in the middle of nowhere, and there's rocks and sand where the car kind of pulls off to the side. So we tactically get behind the vehicle, and all of a sudden the vehicle starts spinning the wheels and creates a smoke bomb around it. So you can't see the vehicle at all. And all you see is just white dust everywhere. And you're like, what? What's going on here? So tactically, it's very dangerous. This guy probably has a gun. He can come out, start spitting rounds. So we let the smokes kind of sedate a little bit. And then one of the guys goes to the car, breaks the rear window to try to take a look inside. But the smoke, it was too much, right? Because you can't see. Finally, we decide to move into the car. As we move into the car, we have a team taking down the driver's side. I was responsible for the passenger side. Anyway, we're dialing in with guns. Finally, open the door on the passenger side. On the driver's side. The guy basically, what happened was that he blew his brains out, and then that reaction of stepping the accelerator was just like an instant reaction. So it spin the wheels, you get smoke all over, and that's what happened. Wow. And then as I open the door on the passenger side, I have his girlfriend's brains all over me, all over the car. He blew her brains out too. Okay. And you're in a position where you're like, oh my God. Okay. However, really where the story goes is the fact that, we had patrol come and take over the scene and do whatever they needed to do. But there was a sense of peace and tranquility. My commander says to me and to the team, he looks at us and he says, all right, guys, let's go. Let's hit Denny's. All we're thinking at that moment is we're starving. We want to go eat our dinner. Like nothing, like it was just like
another day at the job.
Another day at the job. So you get jaded, but it's also the mindset. And you have to live like that when you are in a violent city. Wow. It's almost like, hey, it happened. Because if not, you get lost in that, man.
Yeah.
You get lost in the feelings and the emotions.
Of course.
So, that's
incredible.
This is a great discussion here, because when we talk about like the feeling of fear and purpose and all that, it's within all of us. But the control factor, that we're able to control it and move in spite of it and live our lives. A lot of people say PTSD is real. And I'm one of those guys that's going to say yes to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. I believe you can dominate your mind, command your mind, grab hold of really, who you are and understand yourself a little bit better. And we wouldn't have half of these PTSD cases, But
Yeah, it's funny. My sister's a nurse. I mean, definitely not even close to the extremity of that.
yeah, but all
But
my respect to nurses, man.
yeah,
All
she
my
told me
respect.
that she sometimes will have clients in the hospital or patients, I'm sorry, in the hospital for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and it's like an older lady and her husband, or it's a recently single mother, or there's always some sort of story that's just pulls at the heartstrings. And she'll develop a friendship with them, and she'll, for example, she had this older lady that every Friday she would she would do her feeding, and they would hang out or whatever. So they developed a friendship, and they talk about life and marriage and kids and all this. And she fed her on Friday. When my sister went in on Monday, she had got her something, but the lady had passed.
Hmm.
And my sister, right after that, had to go do like a presentation thing. And so she literally found out that her friend in the hospital had died. Then immediately
Wow.
after, had to go handle something, and then had to go because her kid was sick, and then had to go cook
Bounce
dinner.
to bounce to
And
bounce.
and so the emotional flexibility,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have time to sit there and dwell and stay at home all day and think, wow, what a beautiful you got to cook dinner for the crying kids, and then you got to do this. So I to a degree understand that, but yeah, I can't
It's a
imagine.
processing, how you process it.
Mhm.
She's probably great at processing that because
Yeah.
you see it so often, and so. But it's tough to a certain degree. But once you just learn it and live it, you understand that hey, it's part of it's part of how you're built now, how you're wired.
Yeah, emotional flexibility. Yeah.
Without a doubt. All right, so let's talk a little bit about entrepreneurship here. And you've taken it to the next level. You've really changed, from going door to door, and
Yeah.
So, where have you really learned the most? In other words,
Mhm.
where have you the tactics and the strategies that you use now in your life? Where have you? Has it been through podcasts? Have you learned them?
Mhm.
Have you read? Are you a big avid reader? I mean,
Mhm.
talk to me about that.
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything, but mostly trial and error, right? And iteration, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I started in business, I started my production company because when I was working at Tesla, everyone was telling me like, oh, you should do this, you should do that, you should do that. So one time I met this real estate broker, very successful in the area, actually the most successful guy in the area. And he came and bought not one but two Teslas from me. Like he bought one, and somehow I convinced him to get one for his wife. And he bought two of them, and he spent almost like 200 plus grand, and didn't even flinch. Like it wasn't like for me at that time, I had never even seen 20,000 in my account at the time. So the fact that someone so easily is just spending $250,000 on cars for him and his wife, and the car was an afterthought for the wife, I was like, what the?
Yeah.
And so we start talking. And he tells me he's in real estate. And he's like, yeah, I'm a real estate guy. You ought to think about doing other stuff. And at the time, I was tinkering with the idea of videos, but hadn't fully executed it. And he goes, well, do you have any other skill sets or anything you do? He's like, I'd love to work with you. And I said, well, yeah, we I'm working on some videos and like a podcast thing and all this. And he goes, well, dude, I actually need help with our office creating like video content or whatever it is. So he was like, can you guys help me? I had no experience with it, but I was like, yeah, absolutely, right? And so he goes, yeah, we're looking to make like a video for the office and da-da-da. So he gives me a whole brief, connects me with his team. And then they give me the idea and vision for it. And so they give me this whole treatment or whatever. And this is actually how I started in business at all. This was my first entrepreneurial thing. When I was a kid, I sold chocolates and stuff, but a bigger business later, this is how it started. So I met with this team, and they told me their vision. We want a marketing video, like a whole campaign, a longer video with all the agents, all this stuff. So I was like, okay, cool. I'll get back to you with a quote. I took that exact brief that they had, found my videographer friend, and was like, hey, bro, how much would you charge for this? And he told me like $2,500. So I was like, perfect. So I went to them, and I said that it was $7,500. And they were like, all right, cool. They sent the money that day. The next week, he went to go film it, and I made $5,000 profit in a day. And I was like, I like this. So then I just started doing that bigger and bigger, and we started getting clients on retainer and then growing everything. And then as the show grew, we'd get more and more clients coming to us to handle their stuff. But that was sort of how it started initially. Arbitraging talent, where you make sure the talent is getting, you get great talent, you pay them great, and you make sure you deliver a great quality product, and then you can make the upside. So that was how I started in business. And then as I gradually ascended up it, I would start to notice different things about different business models, right? Certain people have a lot of complexity in one area. Other people have a much more sustainable thing or scalable thing in that area. And then you start learning about things like scale. Okay, if I do this, I can only make this amount of money. So what if I, instead of selling one video, what if I sold packages for the quarter or for the year, and then did them discounted and sold them at the end of the year so the business owner can get the write-off, right? So then I would just learn all these different things, but I've always been the type of guy to call people. If I want to learn ads, I want to find the best Facebook ads guy. If I want to learn this, I find the best, even till this day, right? Not just in business, but even with chess, right? I got super into chess this last couple of years. I hired a chess coach, right? So to me, I'm always one to, anytime I have a deficiency, I find someone and I want to shorten the gap. How can I pay them? How can I pay somebody, even if it's just 1 hour, right? I've always been the type to do that, right? Even I think one of the things I learned too was, for example, I learned this from Alex Hormozy. He talks about how he wanted to learn ads, but this company wanted to charge like $10,000 a month or some crazy number. So he goes, how much would it cost if I just talk to you for an hour and we screen share on Zoom and I just show you what I'm thinking and we just live feedback in real time? And the guy ends up doing it for like a couple $100 or a couple $1,000 for a couple sessions. And he's like, boom, recorded them, got them as SOPs. And so now you're going straight to the source. So for me in business, that's what I do. Anytime I'm stuck, I think of a concept called who, not how, which is a great book from a good friend of mine now, Dr. Benjamin Hardy. But yeah, that's been my philosophy is when I'm learning, yes, it's books, yes, it's podcasts, but most of the time for the specific nuanced thing I'm trying to solve, it's a who, not a how. It was true when I started in business, because if I had told them it was $7,500, but then now I got to learn video, now I got to learn editing. But if I find a who's solve your problems more than hows as you level up. Even when I talk to some of the biggest entrepreneurs in the world that I've gotten to meet, a lot of them have no clue how a lot of their business runs. I was just talking to one of my buddies who sold his company for $100 million. He's in his 30s. He just exited for $100 million. And I asked him all these technical, I was like, what software did you guys use to do this, and that? He's like, bro, I have no idea. I just build the team. I put the right people in place. I find the right who's. And I think of myself as, like a choir, right? Instead of playing the instrument, I play the choir. Some people focus on the guitar or the drum. I rather conduct the group. So making that switch and finding the who's, that's what's helped me the most in business. Then I'm looking for new bandmates, or new band members to build on, so that I'm playing the choir, not the instrument.
You mentioned quality and high standards. Okay. How important is that? From my angle, I live it, I breathe it. I mean, I'm always striving for excellence. Sometimes, people look at it like I am nuts, So how important is the quality and the standard that you are building right now to you?
Integral. And there's a great quote. It says, what got you there will keep you there. And sometimes the temptation is when you put so much standard and emphasis on something to get it to a certain level of quality, you can cruise control, right? And I think that's very dangerous, right? Even with us, for example, like in real time, one of the issues we're trying to find is high quality production for our editing. We've had times where we'll put a video on the channel that gets 4,000 views. We switch that 1 minute intro and it gets 400,000 views, right? And so finding editors has been a huge challenge for us, like super high quality standard. That's one example, but there's countless examples of it. And I will say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I've interviewed hundreds of multimillionaires, multi-billionaires. The number one challenge every single one of them has is people. Not even sales, not making money. It's how do I find great talent, great employees, a great right hand, a great team, and that's sustainable. Not just that's good for a week or a month or 2 months, but somebody who at 5:30 p.m. if you need something doesn't go, well, technically this is off hours. I'll get to it tomorrow at, as you're nodding your head, you know how frustrating that is, right? It's like people who really give a fuck, people who are like all in, right?
Bet it in, yeah.
Yeah, and who give a shit, right? Like I would never, even when I worked a 9 to 5, you know, if I'm in something, I'm happy to over deliver. I'm happy to be a part of the team. I know it'll show up later, or somehow it'll lead to me benefiting. But I feel like I might sound like an old soul now, but I feel like this generation, right? This generation, back in my day, but no, I find it incredibly challenging. But it starts with leading by example, because in my experience, the best opportunity you have to attract talent with high standards is to be somebody of high standards yourself, because like attracts like. But that is so important. It is so important. And I never forget it. What got you there will keep you there. So if being a maniac who's super attention to detail, who wants to move the camera up an inch when everyone else is like, oh my God, it's so weird. Why would he do that, right? But it's those little inches that make the big difference, in my opinion. And so I'm obsessed with the little inches.
So we talked about proximity. And I want to tie in also the people that you surround yourself with, your inner circle. You know, one of the things that we preach here, that I preach, you know, day in and day out is, you know, your inner circle is probably the most important component of your entire life.
Yes.
So, you know, what's your belief in that? Well, you know, as far as creating your inner circle.
I love that question, man. So 2 things I'll say. Number 1, environment trumps discipline. I heard that one time, and I had a hard time accepting it because I thought you could out-discipline it. But I truly find that environment trumps discipline.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean discipline's not important,
Right.
but I do think environment is number 1, like number 1. Because I'll give you an example. You could be, you know, in the best whatever shape, best finances or whatever, but you get the wrong woman around you, you get the wrong friends around you, you get the wrong, users around you. Doesn't take long, right? 1 drop of poison. You could have a whole gallon of water. 1 drop of poison ruins the whole thing. You're like, oh, it's just a drop, right? It's just one guy. He's not so bad, right? So my whole thing is like I have incredibly high standards. Even my team, probably to an extreme degree. I drive a Mercedes-Benz simply because the motto is the best or nothing. Right? That's literally Mercedes-Benz motto, the best or nothing. So to me, I think it very similarly with my environments and people we surround ourselves with, which is why I get such a joy out of interviewing such high-level people, because all the conversations that I couldn't have with friends, I'm sure you can relate, where maybe, they say a prophet is a prophet everywhere but his own home. Right? You could come to a podcast with high-level people, but maybe to your family or kids, oh, there goes Rafa talking about discipline again.
It's impossible being a prophet in your own land. Yes. I hear you loud and clear.
A prophet is a prophet everywhere but his own home. But other people are like, oh my God, Rafa, they'll pay you tens of thousands of dollars for your advice, but a close relative you give advice to is like, easy for you to say. And you're like, what? But that's just how it is sometimes, right? I can very much relate to that, right? There's times where, I'll get on, people pay us crazy premiums for the stuff we do, but, I try to tell my mom something and she's just like, yeah. And I get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I find environment is so important, and also to the degree that like who you surround yourself with is who you become. We've all heard that, but it's because your standards elevate too, right? Like I remember in solar, like I literally found the best fucking guy at the company. Like everyone was trying to make this amount of money, that amount of money. To me, right away, when I went to the solar company, I was like, who's the number 1 fucking guy in the company? And I paid him $100 for 30 minutes of his time to hop on a Zoom because I wanted to know, what do you do? How do you operate? And I actually found that his system was incredibly easy. That's why like a lot of times you'll be blown away at how high-level people, it's actually way easier. Certainly in my life, like I will say at the 7-figure level, it's actually, maybe it took more work to get there, but in terms of operating it, it's actually easier than it was to make my first 10 grand a month or my first, because I'm in environments where it's normal. In my circles, it's normal to be making multiple 6 figures or 7 figures a month. That's normal. Like if you're not, that's like, what's going on, bro? What's the issue? Whereas when I was younger, I couldn't even fathom that in a year, let alone that being like, I mean, we have expenses at 6 figures a month now,
Right.
payroll. So, but that became the case because of who I surrounded myself with. So that became normal. So the one thing I always say is like, you know, when you, at least in my opinion, when I was young and I was dreaming of doing big things or making millions of dollars or all this, I used to think that you'll get it and you'll run around like, woohoo, I made it. And, you know, like, oh my God, this is so incredible. But then when you're there, it's more like, it's more like, oh, this is normal. So you want to elevate your sense of normal, right? When you're a kid, maybe did you have a dream to be a professional athlete or something?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually, believe it or not, I wanted to be an EMT was my dream.
Okay, yeah.
EMT. I don't know
Yeah.
why, but yeah.
No, that's cool. So when you're a kid dreaming about it, we all romanticize what it would be like.
Yeah.
But when you're in it, it's normal.
Yeah.
So to me, the goal is to elevate my sense of normal, right? So that the for example, a night at the Ritz isn't a big fathomable dream. It's normal. It's normal, right? And so, for example, with friends that are living at a higher level, it now elevates your sense of normality. Oh, I should be doing this, or I should be going to the gym, or I should be, operating a business like this, or I should hire an assistant, or I should hire, right? You start seeing people around you, and so that becomes the new normal. I think most people are stuck in their paradigms, and if, like, anybody who feels stuck in their life, before you look at yourself, I would look around you. You might be doing everything right, but you're just in the wrong, a shark in what is the expression? You could be a shark, but if you're in a pond,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean anything, right? You'll be a big fish in a small pond.
That's right.
So you got to find your environment.
Yeah.
Because for me, for example, I had a hard time in high school and college finding friends. Incredibly challenging. Because I used to love to talk about stuff like this, but to them it was just like, oh, here goes the philosophy talk, or here goes it. And it's so funny because those people who didn't want to be in that environment or didn't enjoy it, now they watch the show where I get to do it with Ed Milet, yourself, that millions of people now love the very thing that was once annoying to people. Why do you talk about why do you overthink everything? Why do you overthink everything? But people on the podcast are like, I love how much depth you went into around this, and millions of people do that, watch the show and in business and all that. I didn't change. I just changed my environment. You see what I'm saying? So I think everybody has their own versions of that, and unless you elevate your environment, you'll never be celebrated. In this, I could be condemned for the same thing I'm celebrated for. Think about actors, right? One of my friends is an actor named Bart Johnson. I said, what made you want to be an actor? And he goes, well, being an actor, I get paid and celebrated for what I used to get made fun of. Right, for having such a personality, right?
Makes sense, yeah.
Just changing the environment can change your life.
Sure.
And a lot of times, imagine if I would have, instead of starting the show, gone, man, I overthink things too much. I should think less. If I changed myself, I might not be in the position I'm at today. But by changing the environment, all of a sudden, people are like, oh my God, we'd love to talk to you and all that, so, yeah.
Right. So one of the things that you were talking about was that you seek excellence, that you want to learn from the best. And one of the things that I see very, very often is that people don't want to invest in themselves. And for whatever reason, a guy will go out there and spend $2,000-$3,000 on a TV. He'll spend money on a car, and he'll spend money on this and that.
Strip club.
Whatever, right?
Yeah, crazy.
But in their own skill set, because what you're telling me here is that you are actually, you seek mentors and coaches to hone your skill set. And that's critical. And I need people to hear that, because that is so important. There is not a better investment than in your personal development. And that's critical. So, what do you say to those people that are out there that they don't, they don't want to invest in themselves? They're not willing to. Everything that they look for is, let me get a freebie here in YouTube. Let me get a freebie here. Everything is free. But they don't want to go out there. And sometimes you got to pay the piper. I talk about that. What do you say to those people?
Yeah, what I say to those people is two things. Number one, my life has never changed without me investing in myself, because the highest commitment you can make in yourself is an investment, right? The more people pay, the more people pay attention, right? That's the first thing. Yeah. But the other thing, and perhaps the most important, is like I look at life as, especially if you're an ambitious man or woman with dreams, right? If you're a man or woman of war going after what it is what you want, you're literally, I love the name of war, because it's literally war. Like, it's hard. Marriage is war. Business is war. Life is war. Your own mental, emotional, even if you're laying in bed just with your own thoughts, is war sometimes, right? And so what I find is not just on the support side, but life is about turning the resources you have into the resources you want.
Yeah.
So I don't look at money as, I mean, what is money if you think about it? It's an interchangeable resource, right? It's an exchangeable resource. Any amount of money in your pocket right now, well, you're going to spend it somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Money's cyclical. It always comes back. The only question is, what do you have to show for it when it does? So, like, for example, if someone's going to invest in coaching or mentorship or guidance with yourself or whatever they're inspired by, is like, if you're going to invest that money or not invest that money, you're going to spend it somewhere anyways. Where are you going to spend it?
Yeah.
And what's a higher ROI on spending it? What, another cheesecake dinner?
Right.
Another this, and
Sure.
you know, so what do you have to show for it? That's the thing. So to me, I look at it as turning the resources you want into the resources you have. That's why for me, every time I've made my biggest investments, my back was against the wall.
Sure.
I mean, when I was $30,000 in debt and I invested, you know, that first $850, it's supposed to be $1,000, but I only literally had $850. So I asked him if he could do $850 and a coffee at Starbucks. And I met him for that. And that ended up being the foundation of a partnership that led to so many bigger things. The Tony Robbins thing, right? I emptied my bank account to go to that event and say VIP, right? Then even as I've ascended and got bigger, I mean, I've been a part of masterminds that cost $100,000 a year to be a part of. That's not easy. That's a scary check to stroke. But it's because I'm turning the resources I have into the resources I want, right? Because what good is it if I keep the money and don't get the lessons from Rafa? Am I better off? Right? I'm oversimplifying, but you get what I mean? Is like, would I rather keep the 10 or risk the 10 to get 100? Yeah. And life is too short to not. Plus, it's not like it's the only amount of money you're ever going to get. You can make more money, keep reinvesting in yourself. You only need 1 or 2 or 3 investments in yourself to pay off for 5, 10, 15, 20 different years of struggle that could really throw you off course, right? All it takes is one idea. It could totally change your life. I'll give you an example. At the Tony Robbins seminar, on a practical level, I invest that $1,000 into going to the event, right? Imagine if I was like, well, what is he going to teach me that I can't get for free on YouTube for $1,000?
Which is the attitude of a lot of people, yeah.
Right, yeah, I get it for free. Why would I pay $1,000 to go to the seminar? Yeah, you learn the stuff, which was very helpful, which to me is more than worth it. Which I have a funny story. I actually ran into Tony and got to buy him dinner at the Palm Beach Resort. Because I bought him dinner, he actually agreed to come on the podcast. That's a crazy story.
Wow.
If you want to get into it, we can talk about it. But I digress. That $1,000 investment, right, that I could have been like, oh, I don't have the money, I don't have this, it's too expensive, let me sit in the back, right? But because I spent $1,000 that I barely had to go to the VIP section, I'm sitting next to a 6-figure guy. That leads to me getting into solar and making 6 figures, which then leads to Tesla, which then leads to the Air Force One guy and the client for the production company, which then leads to me finding the videographer at the production company that then becomes my partner on the podcast that we end up producing. And you see how all of that trajectory.
Love it.
But I don't have money to invest in myself.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? So I think life is about turning the resources you want. And sometimes that resource is time, right? Tony Robbins talks about it. Resourcefulness is the ultimate resource. Even when I didn't have money, like even after I did that, when I found a production partner for my video guy, I didn't have any money to pay him. So I go, well, I don't have the money to pay him. Let me not do the podcast and wait until I save to do the pod. No, resourcefulness, right? Sometimes the most resourceful thing you can have is your emotional creativity. So my thing was like, okay, well, I was like, well, dude, look, I don't have any money to pay you. I want to. You're totally worth it, but I don't have any money. Do you have any ideas? Right? Let's be emotionally flexible here. So we came up with an idea to do a rev share partnership. So we ended up 50-50 AdSense revenue. He would come on to produce initially for free. We drafted up an agreement. And and so he didn't make any money for the first 2-3 months. But fast forward, he was making thousands of dollars a month on stuff, and it started to compound at scale because he became my partner in it because, I used resourcefulness. I didn't have cash. So my resource at the time was creativity, right? And instead of saying, well, let me wait till I have cash or I don't know or da-da-da, found a partner, got resourceful, negotiated that deal. He ended up being my partners for years, and we ended up growing the show, and, both of us ended up doing pretty well. So,
Amazing.
yeah, if here's the last thing, the best case scenario of not investing in yourself is staying the same.
Yeah.
If that's worth it to you, keep the money. You know what it costs you to do it, right? To invest in yourself. My argument is that it'll cost you way more to not do it. So think about what it will cost you to do it. Think about what it'll cost you to not do it, and roll the dice yourself.
The other day, yesterday, actually, I was on a podcast. They asked me how much money I've invested in coaches and mentors.
Yeah.
And I went back and I actually started to calculate. And I remember I had $50,000 saved in my bank account. This was 3 years before I retired in law enforcement.
Uh-huh.
And when I decided to start moving in the right direction and start saying, you know what, I need to know. Remember, I come from Wall Street. Before I became a cop, I was a Wall Street broker. I did very well. I mean, I was making $1 million a year. I mean, it was an amazing experience for me. But then, my story is I needed to serve for a higher purpose. So I literally went from making $1 million a year to making $38,000 a year. Wow. That shift, right? That dynamic shift. And
how humbling was that?
Okay, and then I did 18 and a half years as a cop. But wow. 3 years prior is when I started to build this empire. Mm-hmm. And I started to learn, and I had literally had $50,000 in savings. And a lot of it because I was an entrepreneur and I started traveling the world and using my skill set to teach. But I literally took $30,000 of that money over about a year and a half period to pay for coaches, to pay for mentors, to go into masterminds, to shake hands with people, to enter this world that I had been disconnected from again. And I had to pay the piper. But in the end, I could tell you that within a year and a half, about a year and a half to 2 years max, I had made that money back times 100. I started making this company started to reach 7 figures about a year and a half before I retired.
Wow.
It was like, I was like, wow, this is really happening.
Right.
But I would have never arrived there unless I invested in myself.
Correct.
And I believed in that. And I never told my wife, not one time, that I took that money. Right. She just thought it was people that,
yeah.
people that good friends of mine and whatever.
Yeah.
They didn't know that I had to pay, a couple grand here, $5,000 here, go to this event, VIP, shake hands. So,
what would she have said if you told her at that time?
She would have gone nuts, because women want security, right?
Right.
She would have gone nuts. But with that said, I kind of digress on that. She trusts me enough to know that was the time in my life where I had the journey and we were getting out of that funk. I mean, my story goes, it's a long story, but
so you've had it and lost it and sort of had to rebuild.
What?
Yeah.
What? Yeah. I'm talking about foreclosures of people coming to my house and whipping my newborn and me out of my house because foreclosures. I've had cars repossessed when my wife is out there with the baby in Starbucks and I'm in patrol and then she calls me, honey, they stole my car. I'm like, fuck, they didn't steal your car. I didn't pay it for 3 fucking months.
Yeah.
So I've been...
And you're in law enforcement, so the shame and embarrassment. And
I've been through that,
You've been
man.
humbled, man.
Okay.
Much respect. Life's fucking hard. Yeah, I get it.
I've been through that, man. So...
Man of war.
So it's when I look at it, and you have a great point where it's, the time and the hands that you've shaken have, they've taken you from here and then that led to another, led to another. That is so powerful. And people really need to hear that. Mm-hmm. So I truly love that. Now, and we're going to close this off in a couple minutes, but I want to dive in here. Spirituality in your life. Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you consider yourself a spiritual man?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most people who go to war for their dreams would, but I certainly do as well. And honestly, maybe at times, maybe my ego early on would get in the way, but I've had so many blessings in my life that I would be just pure stupid and naive to not think that there's a divine hand helping in what I'm building. I mean, to the degree that I'll literally go to a hotel in Vegas and I ran into David Goggins, or I go to the restaurant here in Palm Beach and I run into Tony Robbins, end up taking care of the bill for him and his family. He agrees to be on the pod. At a certain level for me, I do believe it because I do feel a sense of tremendous gratitude. Not saying that I'm only spiritual because of those things, but those things have opened my eyes, because I can't tell you, similar to yourself, we all have our own stories and everyone's pain feels maximum to them.
Mm-hmm.
But there have been times, man, where I remember building the show, I would be at the gas station and I couldn't put gas and I would literally start crying. I know that sounds pathetic, but I would literally start crying. I'm like, how the fuck am I getting millions of views on the show, but I'm totally in debt on all my credit cards. I can't afford fucking gas. I'm afraid to run into a fan of the show and have to borrow $20 for gas. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it was literally that bad. And so to be in positions later, I never forget that. I never forget the prayers that young kid made. I would just be like, please God, let this work. Please God, let me make money doing what I love. Please God, because I could have done all this and nobody watched the stuff, right? It's very possible, right? So the fact that things worked and started to get lift and we started to meet people and the right team members would come about and all that, I do believe that required a tremendous amount of spiritual belief and also spiritual awareness that there is a bigger hand at play, and I'm tremendously grateful for. So yeah, I was telling my cousin, because he's always seen me pray. I pray every day, literally regularly. And so we were joking about it, and I was like, bro, I've been through so much shit. I don't care how good things are. Thank you, God. I'm grateful. I'm humbled. I take nothing for granted, because every time I've been humbled. The pride before the fall. So I think spirituality and gratitude and appreciation for God is tremendous, man. Tremendous.
I love that, man. Gratitude.
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah, and even it's funny. I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of pattern interrupts.
Yes.
So for me, anytime I start to get heated or overwhelmed, it sounds silly, but I literally will do gratitude. I'll literally, anytime it's like a stress response, so to speak. Anytime it's stress or negative vibes or anything's happening, I'm grateful that my clothes are clean. I'm grateful I woke up today. I'm grateful I don't have food poisoning today. I'm grateful that appreciate also what you don't have, right? We see what's going on overseas in Gaza, and we see what's going on around the world in different areas, and it's you see things like that, compare our problems to them, right? Everyone's pain feels maximum to them, sure, but you put that in contrast, and we're sitting here in the good old US of A, upset that our revenue isn't as high as last month's, and we're not getting as many views as we'd like.
Yeah.
What a privilege that is.
That's
you
right.
know. So yeah, spirituality keeps things in context for sure.
Awesome, man. Well, with that said, I extend my gratitude to you for being here. You've been an amazing guest.
Thank you.
Your
so much.
story is powerful. I think that every listener of this podcast is going to get some great takeaways from this. You're a humble guy, yet at the same time, there's a confidence that you exude, and that's important because, for you to succeed the way that you're succeeding, you need that, and you exhibit that in every way, shape, or form.
Thank you so
much. All right, man.
Bro.
So again, thank you for being on this podcast.
I appreciate you, brother.
Okay.
And for your audience,